You okay, now I think you can hear me. So again, welcome. Thank you very much. Welcome to the class today. It is entitled Your Financial Record. Um, another, a better name for this could be using CTAS to keep the clerk's financial record and producing the documents required, or the clerk prep for Board of Audit. This is not a Board of Audit class, though. I want to make sure that's very clear. This is using CTAS, how to use CTAS, how it works, and using it to produce the records you need. So let's get started. Now, clerk's financial duties. First of all, one of the duties is to furnish the annual meeting of the Town Board of Audit every statement from the county treasurer of money paid to the town treasurer. Okay, we're going to show how CTAS makes your job simpler there. All other information about fiscal affairs in the town's possession, that's going to be your original records, any other information you have, contracts, whatever the case may be, and all accounts, claims, and demands against the town that have been filed with the clerk. All right, I see a question real quick, and I'm going to leave this question about downloading to Devra because I'm not quite sure how that works in here. So let's keep going. With the Board of Audit, there are 8 things that you have to do as a clerk. You've got to bring receipts register to show that the receipts match. Now, if you're not using CTAS, you're bringing a book of receipts or a file folder, whatever it is. You have to do the same with disbursements. The next thing is Schedule 1. In CTAS, we call it Schedule 1. In your record, it could just be columns showing that your funds balance to whatever the funds of the treasurers are. The money that you've received from your county auditor, the original claim forms with invoices attached, any filled receipt books. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later. The treasurer is going to bring bank statements and their records. I'm not focusing on the treasurer records here. We're focusing on what the clerk is supposed to have, and any original records you have in your possession. So best practices is always what we're going to focus on today. Your township can do things a little bit differently. That's okay. I am not going to give you this person goes first, then this person does. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm not telling you who has to do what. I'm going to tell you how to create your financial record as a clerk. There are some statutory requirements that have to be followed. That's why I pulled the Board of Audit. That's just one example. So welcome to Financial Records 101. Who knew you had to do them as a clerk? I don't care if you've done them before or not. The clerk is to maintain a duplicate financial record. The treasurer is the financial officer of the township. That hasn't changed. Now, duplicate is required because most townships have elected clerk and treasurer, and they aren't audited on a yearly basis. That's one of the reasons this duplicate record is so important. It provides the first step in trying to get some separation of the duties, get 2 people looking at the books, show that they match. The Board of Audit is another step. That's a statutory requirement for the board. Now, if you have the MATA insurance, your bond is not valid unless you make sure there are 2 financial records kept for your township, one by the clerk and one by the treasurer. So this is a best practice no matter what. So let's go through real quick the audit levels because these things change yearly. At this point, ending December 31, 2019, if your town is over 2,500 in population, using the last census data, and has an annual revenue of over $1,026,000, you have to have an annual audit with generally accepted accounting principles, or a GAAP audit. If you've got a combined clerk and treasurer, the audit has to be performed every year if your annual revenue is more than $230,000. If you've got a combined clerk treasurer position, every 5 years, you have to have a public accountant go through your record and do an audit. It's called an agreed upon procedures engagement for the 5 years that were less than $230,000. Basically, in general, Minnesota doesn't require towns with separate offices of clerk and treasurer to have annual audits unless your town population is over 2,500 and the annual revenue is over $1,026,000. Now let's talk just a second about revenue. When we're talking revenue, it's the total of all money that comes into the township. It is not just the levy. That is one big misconception I've found out there. People say, well, our levy is only $1 million in a big township, so we don't need an audit. Well, you've got to look at all your revenue. Or we have a combined clerk treasurer and our levy's only $200,000, so we don't need an audit. You've got to look at all pieces of revenue. Do you have any road allotment money coming in? Every township does. You have to add that. You have to add your PILT money. You have to add the town aid. If, let's say, you do culvert sales or that $2 you collect for filing fees, all of those numbers go into the revenue. So your revenue really is going to come out to be more than your levy in most years. So keep that in mind when you're trying to come up with a revenue number or seeing if you need an audit. It's not based on, what is the levy. So what's in the clerk's financial record and how can CTAS actually help you? Well, receipts is everything coming into the township, disbursements is everything leaving the township. Some other transactions that impact those: payroll disbursements, investments and indebtedness, and balancing the checkbook. Those are things that are covered in a different class. We're going to talk about the basics, and we're going to talk about the powerful methods CTAS has to help you perform your job as a clerk, and balancing funds with the treasurer. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell. Basically, any money moving in the township, you need to have in your financial record. So we're going to start with receipts. Let's look here first. A separate receipt should be issued for all money received, including amounts received by mail, like tax apportionments, interest money from the bank that comes in on your statement. Anytime money comes into the township, there should be a receipt for that money saying what it was for. If the money's coming from the state, there should be some sort of attachment to it, because the state and the county always give us something that tells us what this money is for. Now, these things are not things I'm making up just to make your life difficult. They actually come from the Accounting Manual for Small Cities and Towns, as published by the Minnesota State Auditor. There is a link for this page in this website, or in this presentation. So why do you really need this stuff? What do you have to have? You've got to have a receipt created by whoever gets the money first. I don't care if it's the clerk or the treasurer. Whoever gets that money needs to be using a pre-numbered 3-part receipt book. Now, the 3 parts are required if you have a separate clerk and treasurer. If it's combined clerk treasurer position, then a 2-part. All right. And depending on who the money's from is going to tell you what kind of attachments get put on those receipts. So if the money's coming from MMB, there is always an email with anything direct deposited. Both the clerk and the treasurer need a copy of that email. Every government can log into the website, view the EFT payment information. You can get email alerts, all sorts of stuff. I've given you their number and their helpline. So if you print this presentation or just download it, you've got that information. But that piece of paper needs to be attached to that little triplicate receipt for both officers. Now, I'm not going to tell the treasurer how to do their thing. I'm a clerk. I do the clerk position. I take mine and staple it to the receipt because my treasurer takes in the money and I get the little receipt that's triplicate, and I have the form. I staple them together. So I've got my proof. The county, the same thing with direct deposit or mailed checks. There's always going to be an email or a paper that says what it's for. If you get money from the county and you just get a check and there's no explanation, contact your county auditor and ask them. That is their job, is to make sure that they give you the information you need to do your job. And you need to know where this money came from and what it's for. There are other payments, and those vary greatly. It could be the $2 filing fee. It could be that somebody came in and bought a culvert or a mailbox stand or whatever else your township does to help people. Some township clerks and treasurers like to make copies of checks. That's perfectly fine if you want to put a copy of the check with the receipt so that everybody knows what it was for. Others just note the information on the receipt. That's going to be up to you to determine what goes on that triplicate receipt. The pre-numbered by the printer, who made the payment, and if you buy the ones that are available specifically for governmental accounting, you've got account number information. You've got a box in here. Now this sample, I wasn't thrilled with it because it says clerk's office and I'm not the one who receives money first, but that would be my treasurer. But depending on what form you buy, some of them say clerk, some of them say treasurer. I don't care which ones you use. They just need to be pre-numbered. All right. So where do the receipt copies go? I promise we're getting CTAS here in just a minute. Where do the receipt copies go? One goes to the person making a payment. These days with so many electronic transactions, and sometimes you just get stuff in the mail, sometimes you've got 2 copies that stay with whoever, with whoever starts this whole thing. So that copy may or may not go out to them. 1 copy goes to the treasurer or to the clerk. Whoever issues the receipt usually holds onto the receipt book till it's full. 1 stays bound in the receipt book so the board can look at the old receipt books at any time and see there's nothing missing and look up any of those receipts. They're going to have the record that they need. Once the book is filled, the clerk retains the bound book. I know this is a difficult thing. Sometimes treasurers call and say, but I don't want to give the original records up. I don't care if you make copies, but the clerk is the records officer, all right? You're going to figure out the best way to handle this, because clerks as records officers, we're usually the ones responsible for records retention. Now, if you've set it up a little different in your township, you're going to do it that way. But normally the clerk is responsible for those records. So my treasurer, a lot of times she'll hang on to stuff till the end of the year, but the box, okay, I have a township office, so I'm not the best example, but some treasurers will hold it and quarterly or every 6 months move the stuff to the clerk once they've, know things are in good order. Now, if you're a clerk who doesn't keep records in good order, your treasurer's going to be hesitant to hand them out, because at the end of the year, there's always times you need to look back at old invoices. So you want to make sure that when you do keep these records, you are keeping them in good order. If you do copy checks, one really quick note, the routing number is considered private data. I know townships are not subject to data practices, but keep in mind when it comes to private data, other than the clerk and treasurer getting copies of those checks, check with your attorney to see if it's okay to give out or not. I'm not going to say blanket one way or the other, but make sure, because routing information is now considered private. Check copies need to be disposed of in a way to make sure and protect the issuer. Shredding's easy. That's not the only way, but that's just an easy way. So let's get into how do we actually use CTAS? How do we enter our receipts? Well, when you open up the CTAS program and get going, a couple things you need to know. We've got the menu bar right here at the top: accounting, payroll, investments, indebtedness, reports, admin, and exit. These are the different modules in CTAS, all right? So when I say in CTAS, you may call me on the phone and I'll say, go into accounting and receipts. That means first of all, in the menu bar, choose accounting, and then these I reference as icons because they're little pictures. And I'll say go into accounting and then choose the receipts icon, all right? So let's say we're going to enter some receipts. Some money's come in, we've got our triplicate receipt, we've got all the paperwork in order. Let's start entering. First, we're going to choose accounting and then receipts. And then we're going to choose the add receipts tab. The tabs are right here. This first one is a receipts list. The second one is to add receipts. You're going to see them change throughout the day, and I'm going to point to them. So when we click on add receipt, the first thing you're going to notice is the next receipt number automatically populates. We're using receipts in this particular areas where our receipt book is. I don't care what that number is, it needs to correspond to your receipt. That comes up automatically. The next thing is it defaults to today's date. Now, as you can tell, this is a screen from the 1st of October, but it defaults and those dates stay the same. You're going to see some information populate on here. I'm going to go through this pretty slowly and talk about things, give you some hints so that when you're entering your records into CTAS, it all makes sense. So once we have a receipt, I want you to look right here. I put the letters INT right here on this deposit date ID. That is on purpose. When you get ready to balance the checkbook in CTAS, it adds all of the deposits made on the same date together. And that, while it works just fine, it just takes you adding some numbers together. For me, I'm lazy and I don't want to have to add the interest to the deposit that was made the same day. So I use these characters here. I use this notation. It makes my balancing the checkbook easier because I like to look at the lines on the bank statement and move those over one by one and have them matching when I balance the checkbook. That's all that's for. So I've got a little example down here. When you're balancing the checkbook, you get this screen. Notice this deposit total is $18.75 here. Well, if I look on 10/1, I had 3 deposits, but I've got one that says INT. Just like the notation here, I can find this INT one for $18.75. I do need to apologize. Some of my amount columns are kind of small. It has to do with the screen resolution I had to pull this from, but we can see in all the examples exactly what we need to look for. So in this case, I would match those up and I could move this over. So next thing, when you are adding a remitter, if this is somebody who you're going to have a lot, make sure and use this new button. When you do, you get this add remitter screen. You can fill in their name. This blue section is required, all right? The rest of them are not. I would highly encourage you to use the rest, but that remitter name comes up and you can add them in right there. Now, is this the same process for entering interest on a savings account? All right, this process that we're doing is for entering any interest receipt. We're gonna, savings account could be something different. A savings account could be entered in the investment module or it could be entered in this accounting module, but any receipt money that comes into the township, yes, has to be entered this way, no matter where it came from. There could be more things to do, and I will not get into investments today. We just don't have time in a 1-hour class. But this receipts remitter ledger, what's nice if you enter it in here and hit save is the basic account numbers and fund numbers that you use are going to be saved with that name. So the next time you bring it up, you don't have to remember or look up any of the account numbers again. Use good descriptions. A lot of us, I mean, I do this sometimes surely from a lazy position. If I take the time to put a good description in, I don't have to go find the original paperwork all the time. Now, I do in cases of audits or to prove stuff, but if I use a good description, I can look at my CTAS and be able to talk to people about what happened financially in the township. Another thing that's required is your total, of course, but I want you to look at something here. The interest has to be split between 3 funds. CTAS does that without a problem. I've got general, road and bridge, and cemetery. We figured out the proportions of interest, not going through that here, and we just put them in. One other thing I want you to see, when you're entering, notice I left the 75 cents off on this one, and there's a difference of 75 cents. When you're putting stuff into CTAS, it has the ability, it knows how much still needs to be distributed. Now in this case, 75 cents is pretty easy to pick off, but that amount's there. All we have to do is enter it right there, 75 cents, we fill it in. Now, you can tell that when I did this example, it says 75 in the difference and 75 down here because my cursor was still here when I took the screenshot or the image. As soon as I tab away from here or go to save, it's going to change. Now these red words up here, this means nothing's been saved. Anytime you see red words or red letters, it means something on that record has changed and CTAS has not saved it yet. All right. When you get ready to save, now I tabbed away from here. I can see my red letters. My difference is down to 0. I'm going to click the save button. Okay. When I click it, save successfully comes up. I hit OK and I'm going to go on. In this case, I stopped and I went out to look at the receipts list. I've entered a few receipts here and I want to make sure that you can see where, when I say go to the receipts list tab, that's the tab I mean. All right. This shows me the receipts for this particular time period. You can, you can change these receipt dates any way that you want, but it's kind of handy because it takes and shows exactly what's been entered to that time period. I can even see those IDs. So I know this was an interest and these were something on a permits deposit. So this is a useful screen. You can look things up, and if you want to go back in to see the detail, you just simply click one and go back in. So let's talk about the receipts register, because once we get all these receipts in, we want to show some sort of report to show what they look like. So since it's a report, we're going to go into reports, and then we're going to choose receipts, and then we're going to choose receipts register. Once we click on the receipts register, a menu comes up and it asks us to choose the date range. In this case, all of the dates, I'm just going to pick a single day for this example, all right? So let's say 10/1/2020 is what I picked. I'm going to click the preview, and here's my report. It comes up with the township name. It says this is the receipts register. It says when it was run, and it gives me the date range right here that I picked. So when you're looking at your reports, okay, I did this 10/1 to 10/1. So I did one day. You'll notice that in my examples, I had to keep putting different pieces in to show things. So some of my examples, there's more data than what you have seen entered through this presentation. But in here, I've got my interest on the checking account. It says what the account was. It gives my fund and accounting numbers. You can see some permits here. These were utility permits. They use some different account numbers. And then I've got some IAW transactions from investing. So we're going to worry about those more later. But this is the receipts register. Up here at the green arrow, you want to watch what page you're on. This is your navigation and print area. So the first is to export to a PDF. The second is for printing. The reason you want to watch this, later on we're going to see some reports where it looks like maybe the answer isn't on the report, but then you'll look and see right here that, oh, there's more than one page, so you have to go all the way through. So what's the big deal about this receipts register? They're nice, they're simple. We saw how quick it is to generate. Well, because it satisfies bring the receipts register to show receipts match the treasurer's. That is one of the first things you have to do for the Board of Audit. And so this receipts register, you just set the date range for January 1 to 12/31 and print it. Voila, there's your receipts register. You don't have to go gathering all sorts of information at the moment. Your CTAS will do that for you. So when I bring this up, hey, we've just done item number 1. It didn't take us that long, and we've got what we need. Best practice for this receipts register. Somebody should be printing it monthly or quarterly. Ideally, you're showing the board the previous month's receipt. And the reason that I say previous month, most of our meetings are not on the 1st or the 30th or the 31st. Most of us have meetings during the middle of the month, and there is no way we can bring a balanced thing up to date to the board meeting. That is too much information trying to do, but we can bring the previous month pretty easily. One officer, by that I mean either the clerk or the treasurer, provides a copy of this to the board members so they can see the prior months or quarters. That should say receipts. As you can tell, sometimes I use my slides over. And basically, this helps the supervisors see how the money's coming in. They can see on that receipts register, oh, this was permits. Oh, this was your county tax payment. So you're educating the supervisors as well when you're doing this. So printing a list of funds received from the county, that's another job that you've got to do. Well, CTAS makes it really simple for you. Again, we're going to use reports and we're going to go into receipts, only this time we're going to use what's called the remitter ledger. So when we get ready to do the remitter ledger, we're going to see, okay, I have 3 remitters in here, 4 actually. You're going to use the single arrow. I had highlighted ABC Company and moved it across. You're going to set your date range. Now this date range can be set any date range that you want. We're going to hit print preview. And in this case, that screen didn't match this, did it? I chose the sample county auditor because we're in sample township in sample county. We picked out the date range 1/1, and this should have been 12/31, but you get the idea. And you'll see all the money that came. So here I've got some tax settlement. Here I've got some tax settlement. Here's my road allotment number. Here's my DNR PILT number. All of a sudden I'm at 245,000. Okay, that's because I added the road allotment. I added PILT to my township levy. But we can see, and this is just what you bring to the report. So this report right here is a list of all the money received from your county auditor. If you've done your entry right, you just pick out the remitter and print it, okay? All right, so that takes care of that money from the county auditor. It's much easier to run the report out of CTAS than it is to take and pull all these receipts together and add them at the end of the year. All right. So any questions on receipts before we move forward? We're going to go ahead and look at the disbursement or claims side right now. Okay. One thing, if by chance there are questions and I get moving a little slower and don't finish the slides, the presentation materials you get do show step by step how to get through everything. So this is a very basic how to use CTAS as well. So with disbursements, at a minimum, the clerk has got to keep track of the disbursements. Best practice, if you're using CTAS, we really recommend you learn the claims process as well. It's a backup. Now, if if clerk's doing the claims first and the treasurer's doing the backup or does it second, both officers learning the claims process is recommended. It only adds a couple of minutes, but it provides a backup, especially in small townships where you don't always have deputy clerks and deputy treasurers. It gives two people who know how to run the program. And I say that, you've probably heard me talk about before. I've had supervisors call me when a clerk or a treasurer passes and nobody else knew how to run the program, and now they've got to face payroll or they've got to turn in reports and they don't know what to do. Okay, so having a backup, I cannot accent that enough. Let's talk about vocabulary real quick because I know a lot of you are new. Claims are simply the unpaid bills. They're invoices or statements that you get from whoever, and they're demanding money from the township. They're called claims for payment. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And disbursements means paid. That means the board has voted and authorized, yes, pay these claims in the amount, and once that money is paid out, it becomes a disbursement. Now, required versus best practice. Tracking funds set out, tracking those disbursements is required. The best practice is to learn the claims process. I just talked about that. All claims required a detailed receipt. One example I use is credit card statements. When those come, it's just a listing of who you bought stuff from. The detailed original receipt that details out what that purchase was needs to be stapled to the statement for the credit card for every one of those purchases. That is required. It's really recommended to have a policy for reimbursements. And keep in mind, if supervisors are doing something that is a conflict of interest, you may need those C6000 reports. I'm not going into contract law here. That's another class entirely. So I wanted to mention it though. C6000 is something most townships do need. So entering claims. Since recommendation is that everybody knows how to enter claims, we're going to go through the process of entering claims and turning them into disbursements. So when you enter claims, you're going to choose the accounting menu, and then you're going to choose the claims icon. Once you've chosen that, add claims. You're going to notice a lot of stuff is real similar. The receipts, we went to accounting and receipts. Now we're doing accounting and then claims, and here's tabs again. We're going to choose the Add Claims tab. The claim number defaults to whatever's next available. All right, in this case, it's this 1,550,011. Again, we want to use the new button anytime you add a vendor. When the vendor screen comes up, the only thing required is the vendor name, but put in as much information as you have. That way, the vendor, all of the different fund and account numbers and object codes are attached to that vendor. If you are not using the new button, then you've got to put those account numbers in all the time on your own, which is okay, but it makes things easier if you use the vendor names. If you're using the vendor portion of CTAS, when it comes time to run 1099s, it knows who the vendors are. All right. It also keeps the names spelled the same because every time there's a different spelling. So if I would have put gravel but reverse the E and the L in gravel, it would have been a different company to CTAS because CTAS is going to look at what is put in. Add your detailed description. It saves time when you've got to answer questions. Now, the notes section over here. It doesn't show on most reports. There's one report you're going to see later that these notes show up on, but it's handy for notes in your reference. Claims with notes show with an asterisk on the claims report. You add an occurrence date if you need to. When it comes to electronic funds, a lot of times we'll use these. The check memo. Do you need something to show on the memo line of that check? Sometimes account numbers or whatever. The total of the amount goes in here, so $60,500. You're going to add your funds and accounts the same way as receipts. You can split them up. Now, in this case, it could be that I was splitting them up because I had two different invoices on this bill. It could be, there's a lot of reasons. You're going to see the reason here in just a minute. Program codes, we're going to talk more about these later, but program codes add a very specific level of tracking for your township. You can enter negative numbers into claims. So in this case, I've got I'll be right back to where I was. I put this note up here in the notes section. We had found an overpayment on a prior invoice. There'd been a multiplication error, so the company issued us a credit. Well, the gravel and everything for this 190th was actually $65,000. I would like that to show in my accounting as a cost of $65,000, but I want to take this credit. So what we do is we enter a negative number in here. So the total we're paying the company is $60,500, even though the invoice was for $65,000 and they had a credit memo in there. Now, when you are working with credits, make sure you use an appropriate object code. This one I picked was in the miscellaneous area. One thing to note, if you've been using your chart of accounts at all, CTAS by default, the auditor has miscellaneous first and credit second. I like to flip those around. It's just what I like. There is no right or wrong. It's just I like to see the word credit first, because miscellaneous, I don't care whether that's on there or not. I leave it on there so I remember what section it came from. Make sure, again, that notes section is really specific, and you're going to see it show up here again in a few minutes. Just like receipts, red numbers indicate it's an unsaved record. That means you need to make sure and save. Once you've saved, save successfully comes up, and you're going to tell it OK. That's how you're going to enter a regular claim in, where you've got the invoice and you've got, it's just a standard invoice you're going to issue a check for. I tried to include some different scenarios into one entry. Next, we want to talk about entering electronic transactions. These are your automatic payments that you're making by default from the checkbook or credit card, whatever. The claim number has to be on there. It is needed. The recommendation is to use some sort of pre-numbered forms. The reason for pre-numbered forms, they usually come in some sort of a booklet. It's easy to tell if one's missing, so that you have a good record. Kind of think about the receipts. You have that good record on purpose. Now, with this, you're going to enter everything. Everything else gets entered in just like a regular claim. When you add the claim, one thing I want you to notice, CTAS automatically will increase. So if we've changed this to EFT for electronic fund transfer, that's not anything magical. That's just what I used for this example. It automatically increases just like the regular number. I cannot emphasize enough, you need some sort of numbering systems for these. A lot of townships tell me they use J for January and the year. That's really good until you get to June. All right, so you want to make sure that whatever you use keeps going. That's why I like the pre-numbered book, because those numbers keep going. It doesn't have anything to do, and the treasurer and I are using the same number then. Okay, so next, after the EFT is entered into claims, you're going to process it normally. For CTAS, the only real difference is the number. The minutes, however, are really different. Remember, you're the clerk. CTAS is helping you with your record, adding, subtracting, but in the minutes, you need to make sure that you've shown that the approval for those electronic payments has been given. Okay, there's a whole article about talking about how to get those in the minutes and that kind of stuff, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I just want to make sure you realize those need to be in the minutes as well. So continuing through the claims process. When you click on the claims list, you're going to see all the claims that you've entered. Again, as with receipts, I entered some more claims. CTAS has this nice little list going down the right-hand side of the page. We've entered the claims, now we're ready to process the claims. So the first step on the list is to print the claims. The clerk is going to have to sign these original claims, so we're going to print the claims. So we go into print claims. We're going to use the double arrows to send all of our transactions over. Again, I apologize for the way this looks. This is because of my monitor on the screen I had available. Then we're going to choose print to print preview. This comes up, we're going to see we have 9 claims. All right, we're on page 1 of 9. So we look and all of the information is here. Down here, this section, this has to be filled out by the clerk. Some clerks don't like doing this and prefer the old method of signing every invoice. I don't care how you do it, but the clerk's duty is to fill this in. This was done by check order number, the first, and you sign the claim. This section here shows exactly what accounts were used. So you can see it was Fund 201, that's Road and Bridge. Here's the account number. In this case, this was the grader 720M, and 212 is fuel for the equipment. All right, that's all that this is. We a lot of times will attach this to the top of the original invoice. The supervisors can see what this claim says, but then behind it, here's all the original invoices, and it's got the detail that you need. Keep in mind, I told you that notes don't print anywhere except on the claim. Right here it is. The notes print on the CTAS claim form. The credit was due to an overpayment on invoice, whatever, it was a multiplication error, and the supervisors can see that we took the credit and only issued the check for $60,500. All right. However you broke it down on the claim is what shows on the claim form. Next, once we've done the claim forms, you're going to print the claims list for approval. Supervisors are going to be signing this after they review the original claims. So a lot of us just put this on top of the stack of claims, hand it to the supervisors, and they can start going through. You're going to pick the date range. In this case, I picked 9/1 to 10/1. And here's my report. It comes out. It's got who the checks are to. It's got my, it's got my good description in here. It's got this little asterisk. That means there was a note. This is that one with the credit. So there's a note on the claim. It doesn't really matter, but it does because I know, hey, let's go look at the note. I can either look at the claim, I can open up my CTAS and see what the note was. And this goes on, it goes through, and we can see $65,000 is how much they're authorizing this month. Here's the lines for the supervisors. They're going to sign that. They should, that their signature on this page means that they agree to pay the claims as listed. Typically it's attached to the top of the invoices. Now, either the clerk or the treasurer generates this, I don't care who. After the meeting, after the invoices are authorized, the clerk is going to get either the original or a copy of this signed claims list for approval. The treasurer usually wants to keep one too for their record, and then the clerk retains the original invoices. That said, if it's going to be a few months in between, that's fine, but make sure as a clerk you've got this claims list for approval. Once the claims are approved, or you've done the claims list for approval, you're going to go to the meeting and claims are going to get approved. You're going to move them to the right, just like when you're printing forms. Everything in here, it starts on the left, moves to the right, and you have to remember to hit save. So I just put a little screen picture down here because this is a process that repeats in many modules of CTAS. They start over here at unapproved, you use the double arrows, send them over to be approved, and then you're going to hit save. Once you hit save, you can go into print checks. I'm not covering printing checks in this because you can figure it out or call me or one of the trainers or the state and we'll help you figure out printing checks. Next, you're going to enter check numbers. I want to spend a second here because this is important. When you go to enter check numbers, this screen comes up. You're going to put your initials here. All right. The most important thing is to make sure this date is right. If you put the wrong date here, you're going to call me after it's posted and say, I can't find any of my disbursements. Or you're going to call Lori or Petra. You're going to say, hey, where did they go? Most common issue, especially this year, is to put 2002 or 2200 for the year. And you can fix all this, but you can't find it because you've got the wrong date on there. So make sure this date matches the date these checks were paid at the meeting. All right. So, and then you're going to press save after you enter the check numbers, which through the magic of computer, we're seeing it at the moment. And once you hit save, you're going to see check numbers successfully updated. If you get a message that has these little red asterisks, it means that those check numbers have already been used somewhere in the system, and we'll have to figure that out. You'll have to go in and see, it's okay to cancel here. You're not going to lose anything other than the check numbers you typed, and go figure out how come that check number is showing up. It could be a mistype earlier. It could be a mistype now. You're going to have to look. Once you've got them saved, you hit OK, and you're ready to go on to post paid claims to disbursements. So when you hit post to disbursements, it comes up with a message. Are you sure? Well, yeah, you're sure at this point. Now, if you're not, you can stop and go back and do whatever, but you'll hit yes, and then it tells you that they've been posted successfully. Then we want to verify it. Guess what? We're going to go to accounting and disbursements using accounting in the menu, disbursements icon. We set our dates and here they are. All right, just like we want. They're showing up exactly. We can see the vendor, we can see description, we can see the total. All right, that's what we want. That is the goal. If you are entering directly in disbursements, it's okay, you're just going to see this. But if you see that claims process really doesn't take that long, you enter it, and when you post it, it shows up, and now you've got the claim number and the check number. Most townships use matching claim and check numbers. If you don't, that's okay too, it doesn't matter, but you'll be able to see what those numbers are. Okay, so now let's go through. We've got our disbursements. Let's print a month of them. So again, we're going to go to the menu bar, we choose reports, we choose the disbursement icon, and we're going to choose the disbursement register. When we choose the disbursement register, it comes up and asks us for the date, whoops, and we can put in whatever date range we want. So this can be just a month, just a year, just a day. When we hit preview, you're going to see here comes our receipts register, our disbursement register. It's got the asterisks. The biggest difference, and I didn't show it on this example, but this would have payroll and it would say payroll period ending instead of somebody's name in order to protect the private data. But here it goes. It's got the description. It's got the asterisk, so we know if there's more notes. It tells if this was a void. It's got the account names, the fund object codes, program codes right here for 1/90th, and it goes through. So this disbursement register is going to show that your total disbursements match the total disbursements of the treasurer. So that's number 3. Now we've got 3 parts of this thing done. We're going to cover 4 parts with this today. So other ways that CTAS makes your job easier. Remember, one of those things that you need to do is show that your funds balance to the treasurer. So let's go in and we're going to use the report module to do this. So you choose reports, you're going to choose financial reports, and then we're going to choose schedule 1. When we choose schedule 1, it asks us what day we want to run this. So this is important that you, if your treasurer and you are both using CTAS, you use the same end date. If only one of you is on CTAS, it doesn't matter. You both still have to use the same end date. When you choose preview, here comes your schedule 1. This is used to show that you balance funds. So you can see the beginning balance of the funds. This beginning balance defaults to January 1 of whatever year we're on. Here's the ending balance. Oops, here's the ending balance of the funds. I'm sorry, my mouse is really sensitive today, but here's our ending balance of the funds. This ending balance should be matching with your treasurer's. All right, I just realized chat box has got a question. Oh, good, it doesn't. I'm assuming that I'm not going to worry about that right now. Bring schedule 1 to show that you balance. You can see that once you've looked at this, it's got a lot of information on it, but you can see the fund balances right here. And once you've done that, that takes care of item number 4. The rest of the things are mainly physical records that you're going to bring, okay? But we're going to talk about how CTAS is going to help you in a little bit more depth now. Back to schedule 1. We can use schedule 1. It's a really great state of the township type report. If we look on here, we can see that, hey, we withdrew some of our investments. CTAS calls it sale of investments. We received interest on investments. Purchase of investment is what they call it in CTAS. And we can see the overall balance of our investment. So that's one of the powerful things you can see on here. And you see it with the regular funds and the balances in the township. Let's say we do transfers. Transfers in and out, this is the easiest way to check that you did your transfer correctly. If you transfer your funds in and out right, we can see that there was a transfer in to Road and Bridge of $25,000. There was a transfer out of general fund to $25,000. Is that what we intended? Or were we transferring from Road and Bridge to general? You can tell very simply from this report. So always take the time to check. One other thing with this report, I am going to tell you when I did this sample of the 25,000, I'd accidentally typed 11/1 or 11/4, I don't know. It was November instead of October of 2020. I printed my report and I had a transfer in but no transfer out. Well, CTAS is very date sensitive. So I went back, I moved it up a month, and guess what? Lo and behold, I saw the transaction. I knew I had made the transaction. I just had to go find it. As soon as I changed the date back to October, there it is, shows up on my Schedule 1. So take the time to just preview some of these reports on the screen, and you're going to verify you're doing things correctly. The overall balance of the township is right here. Now, sometimes we need to retrieve some very specific records. If we're using CTAS, this is where all the power of CTAS comes. You are not saving time when you do your data entry, all right? It's just as quick to write it on a piece of paper. But when it comes time to retrieval, going through stacks of paper versus turning on a program and pulling out what you need very quickly, this is where it's going to shine. So let's say, remember that 190th Avenue that we were rebuilding. Now we want to go in, we're going to choose reports, we're going to choose financial reports and choose program code reports. That's the specific code report we want to pick. Here's some of our program codes that have been used. Our budget year is 2020. In this report, you can only do 1 year. So if you did 190th and it took you 2 years, you'll have to run like a 2019 and a 2020 report and add them together. But in general, we can pull, and here's our information. So we choose whatever code we want. We're going to use the arrow to move one or the double arrow to move all. We move them to the right. We're going to set the year we want, and we're going to click Run. When we click Run, here's our program code report. It tells us what our program code is right here. It shows us what check numbers were written, who they were to, gives us the accounting. See those account numbers? We couldn't have pulled this by account number. Couldn't have pulled it by object code. And fund, yeah, but we would have gotten everything. So here's our 190th Avenue. We spent $66,200. Remember on that $65,000 transaction we had taken a credit? Well, this shows the full $65,000 cost. So now we know this is how much was spent on this 190th road. If we need to retrieve by account numbers, when do we use that? Those MATIT reports. Again, we're going to choose reports, disbursements. This time we're going to choose a disbursement ledger. Our ledgers are really powerful. We're going to choose a fund if desired. You can leave it to mean all funds. One thing right now during 2020 while we're dealing with CARES funds, you can pull just your CARES fund, throw all the account numbers over, and run a report just on the CARES fund to see what you've spent. So we choose the fund. We're going to choose whatever account. In this case, I want to look at the 720M grader. And then I'm going to set my year and I'm going to click Run. I double check, see how many pages there are. And here we can see on the 720 grader, we don't care about the object code because we just want overall, what did the grader cost? Well, we can see we've spent $1,737.69 on our grader so far. All right. I know I'm moving a little bit fast through some of this, but I want to make sure we have a few minutes for questions at the end. The total is fund and account. Now you can throw in object codes and get very, very specific. We're not going to worry about doing that right now. We're just doing it this way. The total for the period is selected. Now right now you'll see that the total budget says 0. We can tell that we're not using budgets right now. We're just, if you do use budgets, this gives you some more information, but since we aren't using budgets, we can ignore the budget balance. We're just going to use these first 3 columns. So where do we use this report? Well, when figuring out, one example, somebody mows at town hall. They don't have a certificate of insurance. You don't treat them like an employee. They're a contractor, and the board has agreed that they aren't going to turn in certificate of insurance. However, for the MATIT insurance, they do get treated like an employee. Now, I'm not telling you this is how it's done. I'm telling you this is how it is sometimes. Dawn or somebody at the MATIT office is going to help you figure out where this goes, but you need those totals. So you could pull by the account number for town hall. You could use fund account object, and you're going to get that total. And then you can use that when you're taking and filling out that report at the end of the year. Now, new deputy clerk started in March. Yeah, you can go ahead and ask. Go ahead and ask whatever questions it is. That's okay. And I will answer them as we can because we're going to have a few minutes at the end. So the next thing here, if I can get the screen to go, if you need to figure out go for payments. Yep, that'll work. Other questions like this CARES funding. I'm using these ledgers a lot. The CARES funding for 2020, pull by fund and run a report. You're going to have a total for that stuff we've got to send off to the state, and it's going to be by account number, so that's going to help you on your reporting to the state. Play with this report. It is a very powerful report. I want to show you how to find a problem on the year-end reporting form. After we do this, I'm going to open it up for questions. So if we go to reports and we run our cash basis report. So reports, financial reports, cash basis report. We're going to pull it up, and I'm going to skip to page 3 for now because I want to show you something very specifically. If we're looking at our cash basis report, anytime we have miscellaneous revenues that are not investment earnings, the state auditor wants to know what the miscellaneous was for. So I want you to see 2 things. Note that we're looking for $181.79 and that we are on line 51 in the revenue section, okay? Those 2 things are important because now we're going to go and we're going to look at our chart of accounts. Here is the link to the chart of accounts if you don't have the new one. And we're going to see line 51 in revenues under miscellaneous revenues is probably one of these 2 accounts. Okay, so now we're going to use our ledger and we're going to open the account. So we'll go to reports, receipts, because this was a receipt, and the receipts ledger. Now, in my example, just so I didn't forget, I put a little box here. There's a lot of accounts turned on that don't need to be. It's okay to turn these accounts off. You do not have to use every number in the chart of accounts. So I'm going to use a single arrow field to move this over to the right, 36,230. That was one of the accounts it said it should be. That's the only one I've got out of the 36,220 and 36,230. I'm going to set my budget year. I only picked out those accounts, and we're going to click print. Notice there's 3 pages here. At first, you look and think 44.35. Well, that's not 181.79. Well, then I see there's 3 pages. So let's look. 1, 2. Next page is a $60. 3. I've got 3 pages. These pages all relate to different funds used. And okay, this is a made-up example, but in this case, I'm going to assume the Snow Cruisers and 4-H Club gave us stuff to build a snowmobile rest stop. I don't know. But when you add these numbers up, that's the $181.79. I can now go look at the receipt, look at my description. I can see there's notes on this receipt, and I'll be able to tell the state auditor when they ask, hey, here's what those numbers were for. Here's what they meant. All right? So let's look at the questions. And account for balancing checkbook left calendar. Okay, with the IADs, I'm going to ask you, Lori, at the last slide, there's a phone number to contact me. I'm going to ask you to ask me that one in just a minute here. I want to finish up a few things, but with your IADs, you're going to clear them out. Okay, so next slide has ledger reports. Those are the 2 reports we focused a lot on. When you need to pull information of a financial nature, your ledger reports are usually going to be the quick way to do it. Either ledger reports or program code reports. Schedule 1 is a great state of this township, but your ledger reports are the real power of CTAS, all right? And I promised everybody, here's my phone number and a email address so you can get a hold of me. Couple of notes I want to make sure everybody's aware of. I didn't, just because we don't have live classes, so you don't know this. While I work for the Minnesota Association of Townships, my main job during the day is working for my township. So sometimes when you call, if you call on a mobile phone, I will just shoot a text back that says, hey, I'm in a meeting. It's okay to text me because if I can talk, if I can answer, I will respond. If I can't, I will get back to you. Sometimes it will take me up to a day. It really depends on the schedule. The email address here does not go to my phone. If you email me, I get emails in the morning and at night when I have my Mac computer. I do not receive them during the day. So the quickest way to get a hold of me is by phone or by text. Email me, I'm more than happy to respond. I respond to emails all the time, but if you need something urgently, please know that's not the quickest way to get a hold of me. Okay, so that's got us through the presentation, the big things I wanted to hit. I'm looking and it looks like are there any other questions? I saw different things flipping on, Deborah. I didn't know if there were was anything in the chat or if that was all on how to get the copies of the presentation.
Yes, in the chat box was the information about how to get the presentation. There were a couple of questions asking for your contact information. I answered those, and then the one person that had 3 or 4 questions is going to contact you by phone to discuss those questions.
That will be wonderful. All right, so that's pretty much what I've got. Is anybody else got any questions on the basics of accounting? We will have information. We're going to actually do a class on investments and indebtedness, because by the time I get all those together, it does take about an hour to go through how to do that in CTAS and get the slides developed so that you can print them out, the how-tos with the arrows pointing to exactly where you want them to go. Otherwise, that's kind of what I've got for you today. Any questions? More than happy to answer them. Make sure, one thing I did provide back here, the state auditor chart of accounts was updated in July of this year. So if you don't have the current one, click this link and you'll get into the CTAS chart of accounts. It was just updated. There are some new accounts. Sometimes you need to add accounts to them. But otherwise, that's it for today. I thank you all very much for your attendance. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and reach out to me by phone or by email. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up if you don't have any questions.
Thank you, Lucinda. This concludes our session. I would like to thank our speaker for her participation and thank all of our registrants who attended today's program. Certificates of attendance and evaluation forms will be emailed to live attendees within 24 hours, and we ask that you take a few moments to provide us with your evaluation of today's program. I invite you to visit your association website for a list of more upcoming programs and hope that each of you have a wonderful day. Thank you.